So welcome, everyone. My name is Theresa Sansome, and I'm a director at the Association of Sustainability Practitioners. We're very thrilled to this event. And today I'm hosting on the subject of resilience and thriving in the face of climate anxiety. And I'm very pleased to be welcoming to the stage Jan Maskell, who's an occupational psychologist, Suzannah Miller, who is a wilderness therapist, Lauren Saunders, who is an artist, researcher and activist, and Alan Raw, who is indefinable. I'm not going to even attempt. Festival director. And so we're going to kick off with, we're going to basically look at these two themes. We're going to explore the themes of resilience and thriving. And, you know, in these times, it's difficult to sometimes feel a sense of agency and hope. So my first question to the panel is how, oh, sorry, see, they know the format better than me. I'm going to get them to actually introduce themselves a little bit so that you can hear a little bit about them. And then I will ask that first question. Thank you, Jan. You're the microphone, so I'm going to. All right.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see so many people here. And it's been, I think, a fantastic event, this EcoFest. So thank you, Alan. Yes, Theresa said I'm an occupational psychologist, often confused with occupational therapist. So nothing to do with basket weaving. I just help organisations and individuals to improve, basically. So that involves a lot of coaching, training, policy development with organisations. I'm also a sustainability consultant, and I work for an organisation called Investors in the Environment, and we help organisations implement their environmental management systems. So I do that by coaching managers, running training courses, designing engagement interventions. I was intrigued that Alan was indefinable, and now we all have to define ourselves. So I'm also defined by the fact that I work at Lancaster University a little bit, delivering their business ethics and sustainability module at postgraduate level. I try to do nothing else because that's the only bit I'm interested in. I'm also the education director and vice chair of Scientists for Global Responsibility, which is a campaign and research organisation which looks at issues like climate justice, peace, and climate change. So that's defined me a little bit more. So
thank you very much, Suzanne.
Hello, I'm Suzannah Miller, and I'm the Wellbeing Coordinator and Events Manager for the PAT Foundation and Green Task Force. So I'm sure you've heard from Andy Steele already today. PAT Foundation stands for Plant a Tree Today. And my work there, it involves different things. My background is therapeutic, and I'm an energy healer as well. And I'm halfway through a wilderness therapy course. So that involves working predominantly with veterans, using wilderness therapeutic techniques to assist them with their mental health. So I've been working for the charity about 4 years, and yeah, it's going great. So, and also I am an artist, an emerging artist, self-taught. So I've been putting on art events for the charity, and including for the EcoFest.
And as if to prove that Suzannah is a wilderness therapist, she's come in some muddy boots straight from a forest bathing experience. So yeah. Lauren.
Hiya. So my name's Lauren Saunders. I'm a visual and participatory artist rooted in Hull. And my interest is in sort of developing human, more than human kinship and relationships to encourage like climate activism, eco-literacy and care towards the earth. That's like my thing, arty. And also I'm also really interested in using art to creatively centre the voice of the non-human and to sort of expand that definition of community to include our more than human brethren, I guess. I'm also the arts lead for Whole Friends of the Earth, and I co-direct a magazine project with Jill called The Critical Fish, which is about making critical conversations and writing about art more accessible and inclusive. I've also got a big background in mental health as well, like both through my own lived experience, but also professionally sort of delivering activities and psychoeducation and resilience training in psychiatric wards and community settings. I also led the co-creation of the NHS Humber trust recovery strategy. So it's quite a big mental healthy thing. So my perspective comes from this sort of arty, activisty, mental healthy community soup.
Fantastic. Alan, define yourself.
It's great soup, that. Okay, so I just had to make some notes to try and remember who I am. My name is Alan Raw. I am a member of Hull Friends of the Earth and very happy to be so, especially today. I'm a director of the Association of Sustainability Practitioners, along with lovely people who are here today as well. I am the former presenter of BBC Eco Time and BBC Introducing. Last show was on Monday, but still available on BBC Sound. I am the voluntary chief executive of the Creative and Cultural organisation, which is 30 years old this year. And with that, we have our CEC, our Climate Engagement Centre, and we also have our Permaculture Garden. And that's with support from Phoenix and the CEC network and many other people here. I'm also a creative sustainability practitioner for Sustainability and Beyond. I'm the Sustainability Officer for Pangalactic Developments Limited at C40I, doing sustainable solutions for space sector. I'm the Festival Director for this, but for this panel, I used to be a therapist. I was a counsellor. I was a youth counsellor for the YICU, which is the Youth Information and Counselling Unit in Hull. And for many years, I was a community and youth worker. So I studied community and youth work at uni, and I also studied counselling at the other uni here. So I do have some experience of dealing with people's anxieties. Well, that's enough from me.
Great, thank you all so much. So our first question is around resilience, and it's a time where people can get very frozen and lose a sense of agency. So the first question to the panel is going to be, what does it take? How do we help people regain a sense of agency and hope in these times?
Yeah, thank you, Theresa. Interesting question. First of all, what do we mean by agency? Well, I think about things in relation to organisations and individuals. So I think about organisations taking control. So what can they do to take control? And a lot of the organisations I work with are now developing their pathways to net zero, which is a real way of taking control and showing commitment. So I think that's their agency, and that gives people hope, gives the organisation hope, gives the stakeholders hope, and it gives them a really clear plan. So it's not greenwash. It's definitely an absolute clarity of direction with clear targets about what they're going to achieve. And I've got an example of an organisation that I've worked with. It's quite a small consultancy. You've got about 20 full-time employees. And they were putting together their net zero plan. And they could quite easily have the directors sat in a darkened room somewhere and going, this is our net zero plan, and this is what you're going to do, and this is what you're going to do. But they engaged the workforce, and they said, we want to get to net zero, but we want you to help us to tell us how to get there. And we want you to tell us what you are going to do in your role. So that was the organisation showing agency in terms of their direction, giving the employees the opportunity to take control and giving them the opportunity to take responsibility for what they're going to do. So that gives them a sense of purpose. So in terms of their well-being, that gives them kind of the eudaimonic well-being, the sense of purpose, and also gives them if once they succeed in doing, because they gave the steps that they're taking towards that, and they can check their progress, that gives them some hedonic well-being as well in terms of positive emotions. We're actually achieving something. So I think the organisations that have a clear plan are the ones that are showing real agency and can give us some hope.
Thank you so much. Suzannah, from your point of view, what does it
Thank you.
take?
Well, I've been thinking about this question, and something that I notice is how we're quite often bombarded with news and information about how less and how little control we have. I haven't been here for the whole of the day, so I apologise if I'm repeating what other people have said. But I find that the anxiety comes from feeling that you have no control. And so for me personally, I try to teach the people that I work with about how you can just take a little bit of control every day. Now, at the moment, we have some funding from East Riding Council and we're running a project. There's still space on that project. It's all funded. It's called the Grants Fork Project. And how we are helping people with agency and hope there is this project teaches individuals, particularly those that are socially isolated, in how to grow your own organic vegetables. And we start that process from the beginning to the end. So, of course, that can assist people in, not having all the plastic waste from the supermarkets, for example. And part of that package is then working together as a team, cooking the food that we've grown, sharing it with the food banks. And then there's also an opportunity to come in the healing hut that I have on site to do some therapy. So I do work with a lot of veterans, and quite often when they feel that they don't have control over their own lives, just by doing those small little steps, which not only help them, but they help the environment and they help the community, it gives them back that sense of agency and hope. And I can see the difference it makes.
Fantastic, Suzannah. Wonderful. Lauren.
Microphone. Yeah. Oh, sorry. So we talk about a lot about like hope and agency and all these kind of positive things, but I think that, and we've talked already in previous things about like fear and how it can be sort of paralyzing, but I think to believe that fear and hope are kind of diametrically opposed things are kind of a bit of a fallacy. I think it's important to hold both of these things at the same time. It's not an and or, it's an and both in the situation, because like you can be terrified of something, but also find hope and celebrate in the good that comes in response to it. And that's where the hope comes from. And I think that we've kind of got this bad habit in this kind of neoliberal, capitalist, whatever society that we live in, that we want to kind of turn away from uncomfortable feelings because they make us feel uncomfortable and icky and whatever. But honestly, I think that it's better to turn obviously you want to look after yourself and not get ill, but turn towards the distress, because, when we do think about this existential crisis, that's kind of what motivates us to keep doing what we're doing. And like, there's plenty of research that's come out in the last year about how fear is actually like one of the biggest motivators. So I think that we want to talk about hope and agency, but not to forget that, it is rooted essentially in not the opposite, but in fear of what's going to happen. Because I think, and it's that thing is that when we kind of take that, you find hope in the fear, we can use that anger and despondency to kind of motivate the meaningful action that does generate hope and anxiety. So, for example, you might be really angry about the state of the world, but then you turn that by doing something good. You are motivated to like grow a garden or go out and get involved in community activism or whatever. And I think it's really important that we acknowledge those two things rather than always just focusing on the nice, fluffy kind of things around the edges. If that makes sense. So yeah, I've got loads. I'm not going to go into a 20-minute rant because it's really hard to like not actually respond to these questions with like, yeah, I'm going to shut up. There you go.
Yeah, I think that was absolutely excellent. And somebody went, so that's good. Yeah, part of the resilience is living with it.
Yeah.
Great. Alan.
I made some notes while I was talking, but it was about what you were saying, nothing to do with what I was going to say. So that's probably not wise. It was just very interesting. I suppose people need to. Resilience is about resisting to a certain extent, and that's resisting all sorts of things, and that resisting displacement has been a big part of our experience here. Displacement by maybe a funded organisation that's just going to replace what we do. So we can't compete with that, even though, we're doing it already. Maybe displacement by water, which could well be coming. Displacement by poverty, not being able to afford to stay where we are, or move out of where we are even, which could happen. Displacement by technology. We've talked about the advantages of AI and satellites and everything today, but obviously there is potential for displacement by technology as well. And people hear about these things all the time, and it's always a worry within, from the role that I've done for the last 22 years, displacement by cuts from another place, from London, where they didn't see a value in local radio, for example. So everybody has their own things to resist. Right. And there's a big difference between resisting and thriving, which we're obviously going to go on to. And I would have thought that the difference is that thriving is a lot better than resisting and actually enjoying it. But you can actually enjoy resilience. You can enjoy resisting. And a lot of motivation comes from it, as you've just described. And I think that, conversations we've had today and through the festival have been about people actually finding joy in being together and resisting and being resilient together, because there is something in that connection and a sense of shared purpose and a sense of like-mindedness. But as you were suggesting as well, it's about the juxtaposition of things. It's about there needs to be a measure against something. You can't all join together to campaign against something there's nothing to campaign against. But there is some joy to be had in that, and we need to value that. But it's about being celebrated, being advocated, being valued, being recognised, being heard, and that's a lot of the motivation for doing this festival, obviously.
Fabulous. So I'm just going to invite you all to just reflect back on what each other has said. If you want to, just for hear from a couple of people.
Yeah, thank you. I was really interested in what Suzannah was saying about the growing things, because I think the act of growing something gives you hope, because you've planted something. That was that nod of agreement there. Yeah. And it's one of the things that kind of prevents aging as well, I have found, allegedly. That through my garden allotment, that I plant things that gives me something to look forward to. And I think that's a really important part of resilience. So the more people engage with nature, but actually creating nature, I think helps to develop not only their own resilience, but I like the co-benefits that you put in there as well about, growing your own food. It's not just about growing any old plant, but it's about growing the food and cooking it, harvesting it together, cooking it together, eating it together. So it's developing those social and community aspects as well. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, thank you. And I have a reflection based on what Alan said, and then going back to what you said. Sometimes the clients that I work with, their issues are so challenging that teaching them to nurture themselves and care for themselves is a little bit of a leap too far. So if we just put a little bit of distance in and say, okay, I want you to look after those chickens. We don't have the chickens anymore, unfortunately, because they brought quite a few rats. But we'll say, okay, nurture the dogs, because we've got an excellent policy down at Pat. We can take our dogs to work. So you can look after the dogs, you can plant the seeds, you can nurture other things outside of yourself. And then that brings that benefit to that individual of knowing how to care for something. And I think then at a deep level, you're kind of caring for yourself because you're caring for another living being. And from my own personal experience of resistance in the lockdown, I couldn't bear queuing up at supermarkets. And in my head, I was thinking, well, actually, we really should be shopping local. So for 2 years, I never went in a supermarket. And that was my resistance, to resist those massive big corporations and take it back local. So that was my little bit of resistance.
Any other reflections? No? Okay, great. So we'll just go on to the next question, which is all about thriving. So, what does it take to thrive? And is it even possible to thrive?
I was thinking about thriving to develop well, but I was also thinking about, I had a really good conversation with someone this week about the work that I do. And they said, you've been doing this for 30 years. Why do you carry on? And I went, because you have to. And it's a no-brainer. Once you know all these things, you can't not do them. And I think this thing about developing, but developing well, because the politicians talk about growth, and they're talking about a different sort of growth than the sort of growth that we're talking about here. But just thinking about my work with organisations, and thinking about an example of a small finance company that probably nobody's ever heard of, so I'm not even going to mention them, but you can ask me later because they could do some really good products. They offer lots of savings products, and often you think, oh yeah, they're just in it to make the money, but they are looking to transition to sustainable savings as their way of developing wealth. And they started this journey with a junior savings scheme, which I thought was really interesting, that they were starting with the children who will inherit what we leave behind. So what was interesting about that was not only did they start that product as their first thing about sustainable savings, but it increased their customer base by about 25%. So just having that sustainable product there, people are interested in that type of product now and want to develop something that is giving something back in that way. So yeah, thriving, I think it is possible. And I think obviously we can do a lot of that through organisations and the organisations that we support as well. I want to know if Suzannah still shops local, which she's gone back to Asda. Yeah.
Great, thanks so much, Suzannah.
Thank you. I think thriving is possible, and something that I've learned mainly through working at Pat Foundation and being privileged enough to be put on the wilderness therapy course, because I've been doing therapy a long time. I've got lots of different qualifications, but they're still paying me for me to do something more. But what I learned is it is possible to thrive, but I genuinely feel that we need to really go back to nature to do that. Now, I'm not, saying the technology and the modern life is not a good thing. It has its place. But from my own personal experience of being in the wilderness, and since starting the training, I've gone out and done wilderness camping, and I've took out veterans and other people. I think when you're there, you can look after the nature, you can respect the environment, you can really connect again back to everything that's natural and leave it as you found it as well, which again gives you that sense of agency. But I do feel from what I've observed in the clients I work with and myself that is where the secret is. So it's about looking after those spaces, those wilderness spaces, so that we can then use them to just connect deep with who we are as a person. Now, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you so much. Lauren.
I also really struggled to answer this question as well, without getting into a sort of a rant about how the world is designed to be against us thriving and all this. But I think that, and it's also really hard because thriving, I think, looks different for everybody, because we're all built different. Some of us have got like neurospicy tendencies or like preferences for certain things or whatever. So I think it's difficult, but I do agree with Suzanne in that, we have evolved to live within the natural environment, and everything is so distant from that, the constant notifications that we get on our smartphones, and that's just constant fight or flight. And I think there is something, thriving is kind of going back to what's real rather than this kind of artificial stress that we have everywhere. But it is also very much about having a relationship with others. And we've talked a lot about that today. And, human and non-human others. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not just about how we connect, but also how we connect to our land, how we respond and how we listen, and how we kind of respond to needs with like kindness and compassion, which is all very cheesy, but it's true. And like, I think that kind of manifests itself well through like community action, which again, we've talked a lot about, but also thriving for me is about like preparing ourselves with skills and tools and knowledge that if things do go a bit wrong and we are, in a situation where we do it does become like not a survival thing, because that sounds really dramatic, but do you know what I mean? Like, we have to know how to listen to the land and work with the land. So for me, resilience and thriving is kind of all of those things. And the way that we learn to do that and how we can connect to each other can be done really creatively. And, it's not just about making art. That's about like cooking, and that's about, sharing resources, and that's about teaching people and feeding birds and all the rest of it. Like, there's many, many ways, because creation really is, if you think about what creation is and creativity, you're doing an action that challenges the status quo. By creating something, you're bringing something new into existence. You're changing something. And I think that to thrive, you know, we are social animals that like to create. And yeah, I think you know where I'm going with this, but that's what thriving looks like for me is relationships with each other.
Fantastic. Beautifully put. Thank you so much, Lauren. Alan.
Okay, so one of the reasons people might not have noticed that this festival is 21 days long and may not have wondered why it's 21 days long. But some people who have been involved in the organising of it know that those early discussions were to do with a particular reason, and that was it was just very prominent on that internet that a lot of people believe it takes 21 days to change your habits, live differently, change your lifestyle, and actually have time to start feeling the benefits of it. There may well be some truth in this, and I've discussed it with psychologists, and they've said, yeah, in some realms there definitely is evidence for this. But that was how we ended up with the 21 days to start with, and that was about allowing people the space to feel like they're thriving, and that is about giving 21 days of opportunity for people to change their lifestyle, access what's going on around them, get involved in the thing that's at the top of their street, be able to walk to it, bike to it, grow food and eat it from there, and just be involved in that and actually start to feel the benefit. But not just in eating better, and getting more exercise, but actually making connection with the people around them who make them feel better as well, just by being friends and getting to know them. And what Phoenix said as well about when somebody didn't know anyone, then they got involved in the community project and then they knew everyone. That was all part of that. And that was to hope that by the end of 21 days, a lot more people were thriving than at the beginning. And I know that, you know, that I've certainly observed some of that, and that's been wonderful. Now, me and Lauren have had many conversations about neurodiversity because we do share some similarities in some ways. And yeah, I am neurodiverse. I take medication for it. There is a lot of people who do. One of the things you might not know is that the supply for a particular kind of medication for a very common neurodiversity ran out in the UK a month ago. So there's an awful lot of people around us who are not thriving right now because they're dealing with having to deal with a lack of something in our community, which shouldn't be the case. So there's always going to be these things to contend with. I am one of those people, by the way, who's been unmedicated for way too many days trying to organise a festival. So, you know, that's my excuse for being a bit out of it today. But enjoying the art that expressed what we all believed, and there was an abundance of thriving going on, and it was beautiful to see and really energizing. And that's still there. It's not part of it, you know, it was a opening event for the festival because it was already there, so we could tap into that and celebrate it. And after the festival, it's still there, and these are pockets of really strong thriving around here.
For me as a coach, I always say, you know, you thrive, we all thrive. There's a ripple effect.
One of the things that you did during the festival as well with Jill, who's also here, was Culture Declares Emergency. And part of the conversation in that was about just the rich heritage history of creativity in this place. And if you look back through that time and think about the challenges that have also been parallel to that, it's got us through as well, hasn't it?
Yeah, just very aware that a lot of what, like on the panel, but also today in general, that it's just about doing. Mm-hmm. It's all just comes down to doing and starting off doing with whatever resources and abilities and whatever it is that you can start doing. That's just it, and it's do. Mm-hmm. And I think, yeah, like I always, people have heard me say before, but like if you're never sure what to do, just start with what's kind and what's caring and what's a nice thing to do, like for the planet and people. And I think, yeah, just do, man.
Yeah, really good point. Yeah, great. Jan, were you wanted to say something?
Yeah, it was something you mentioned in amongst your soup talk. You talked about sharing. And it just reminded me of when I lived in an eco community, a co-housing community. And one of the important things there was that you shared things. So you not only had the common facilities that you shared, but you never needed to go out and buy anything. because you could just send a message to the community saying, has anyone got a, fill in the missing word? It could be a 3-meter metal rule, or a small child that I could borrow, or an outfit or something. I mean, at one point somebody was getting married and one of the guests had turned up and forgotten their wedding outfit. So they sent a message out and saying, anyone who's a size 10 to 12-ish, have you got something that'd be suitable for a wedding? And within 5 minutes, half a dozen outfits turned up at the door. And it's just an example of sharing. And you talk about doing, I think there's more sharing that we could do, which would help to reduce our consumption. So anything that's established as a result of what's been done here in terms of sharing anything, whether it's knowledge, love, joy, kindness, art, thoughts, I think is just worthy of celebration. But it was just that concept of sharing.
Yeah, and I think, I love that the word at the top of the banners here is celebrating, and that we are allowed to thrive is a message we want to send to each other, and that we naturally want to give to each other, that everybody loves to give. And on your what you're saying about sharing, like to spread the message. Yes, I know I want to give, and I want to be part of this of community, and you are allowed to thrive, I'm allowed to thrive, and we can do that together, and you can ask. So let's just put it out for a couple of questions, perhaps to the audience. Anybody got any question for the panel? Yeah, I see a gentleman over there.
Thanks so much. Great stuff. Yeah, listening, uncertainty, grief, complexity. I'm just some buzzwords, some of them which have been mentioned already: interdependence, doing stuff for the past of our place and our globe, and our ancestors and whatnot, and for the future generations which have been mentioned. And mourning and like celebrating, but also having those 2 minutes silence for all different sorts of people. Palestine, Gaza, there's a lot of bad stuff in the world, and that not shying away from all this stuff, what is so depressing, and like getting myopic or whatever. That's probably the wrong word. There's my question. It's not a question, but thank you.
So was that a reflection rather than a question? Just to be clear that we are. Does anybody want to say anything to that?
Yeah, I think, it's really hard to hold all that in your head. But then I think that by doing something and seeing, even if it's something really small, it seems really small. Like we've mentioned about like growing, like you do a thing, you plant a seed, and then a thing happens, and like that's really empowering. And I think that when things feel really overwhelming in your head, which it is, like I feel like I'm drowning half the time from the amount of pressure in my head about the world. But then by doing these little things, you're empowering, you can see the impacts that you're having on the world. And I think that is the most nourishing thing for like yourself, for your mental health, but also for the planet and we live on, and with the people and the creatures. Yeah.
You guys are top experts in processing negative stuff, and I feel like we need to do it together, and I'm sure.
Or just get pillows and we'll all just scream into them collectively. That's the solution.
I think a great thing about this festival is it's showing us that we're not alone, that we can all come together, and that actually every small little thing, actually when we multiply that by hundreds, thousands, right, that actually does make a big difference. And to see, actually we're part of something that's much bigger, and there is something, the ripple effect is bigger than we know. So just planting that one seed does have an effect, because there's tens of thousands of people all wanting to do the same thing. Yeah. And any other questions for the panel?
I think like one of the things that often comes up for me, like maybe a bit more on a personal level, is you know, like a lot of us here, we're all sort of, you know, despite the wonderful things that we do, we're living like, you know, for me, like it's a lot of uncertainty with like funding and that kind of stuff. So like, although, you know, people think our projects are wonderful, it's difficult. It's not always easy to get people to fund them. So we're living in this sort of uncertainty as individuals. You know, for me, like, am I going to be able to pay my rent next spring when this funding runs out? Are we going to get some more funding, for example? And I kind of like I have to really, I sometimes catch myself getting into like the us and them thing, you know, and sometimes I can like, you catch resentments building up about other projects that have got this funding and that sort of stuff. And I think like, you know, there's this kind of danger that like, it's great like doing the festival and bringing us all together, and I think you know, capitalism, you know, still has its way with all of this kind of stuff, I think. So like, has anyone got any comments about that? And you know, us just remembering that underneath all this we're friends, and you know, how to sort of hang on to that kind of stuff as well, you know.
Somebody like to speak to that? Alan, I feel that you're a good candidate.
I was hoping someone else was going to answer that one. I mean, yes, we are underneath that. We are all friends, and I think it's worth pointing out that the whole festival kind of happened on a kind of mycelium network of friends, of people who knew each other. Now, in some sectors of society, that would be nepotism. No, but in this resilience sector, you could call it, that is our power, that is our resilience, that is our connection, which allows us all to be able to network like that and get information around like that and connect like that. And there is, obviously, we do all of this in the face of capitalism and an economy which is not a circular economy. One thing that Candice Joni, I think, has done a good job of summing up with her I Am Impact exhibition, for example, and the things that she's put in about that, is this idea that really she relates all of this to one individual, to something we can all relate to, which is a human body, just something we've all got. And so what she says is that our bones are the economy, and that it's absolutely necessary, otherwise we're just a floppy heap. And then all of our sinews and tendons and blood and everything is the community, the workforce, the people, the substance of people that make up society. And then our skin is the environment. And the current economy is set up to have perpetual growth. The only thing that has perpetual growth in the human body is cancer. And if the bones outgrow the rest of the body, if they outgrow the sinews and the skin and everything else, then that's pain and eventually the end. And I think that, you know, we can all relate to that, and it sounds very difficult to hold. But, you know, together we can actually address this, but we really do have to address that economic perpetual growth model, because we are feeling the growing pains now, and that does need to change. That was a bit gloomy, wasn't it? Something it's supposed to be a mental health panel. How do you deal with that? Eat the rich. Good point. Yeah.
Wonderful. Oh, Gwyn. Last question.
I'm trying not to go down the slope you're on there, Alan. But one way of looking at the root cause of the crises we face, the polycrisis, is that it's nothing to do with the economy. It's nothing to do with stuff. It's an addiction. We have an addiction problem, corporates and politicians to growth, and the rest of us to consumption, excessive consumption, you know, retail therapy, etc. If you treat it as an addiction issue, what would be your recommendations to people to challenge that and to work out of it?
That's a big question, needs some thinking about.
We've got time for thinking.
How would you treat any addiction? I mean, first of all, you have to acknowledge that it exists. And I think that's because it's so embedded in our culture and has been for so many decades that, we spend our way out of trouble. Spend, and we can get over everything. And you talked about retail therapy, seeing it as therapy rather than, something. I'm trying to think what the opposite of that would be. Something. Yes, yeah, no, I'm just trying to relabel it as something because I think the way we frame things is really important. So if we talk about retail therapy, it implies that going out and doing some shopping is going to do you good. And actually, it's doing the opposite. So can we reframe it to be something different? And I think that's a huge challenge, is to change that culture. When you as you walk out of here today, you will see the dreaded Christmas decorations, and it just makes my heart sink. And then I have to go home and cuddle the dog, So I don't. There's not a simple answer to it, but I think treating it as an addiction, I think, is a first step. Acknowledging that it's an addiction and it's something that needs to be treated and needs to be challenged.
If I may give it a stab, I've heard that that addiction is it's around scarcity. That you're lacking something and you're trying to fill a hole in whatever way your addiction is. So it's a scarcity thing. It's a lack thing. And so as part of the ASP Online Festival, I did something called Thriving and Deconditioning from Scarcity, because a lot of, you could say that a lot of our consumerism and so on is based on the sort of story we're told about, you haven't got enough. And so buy, but that obviously, as in the mental health place we're talking about now, if you have a sense of lack of something, a sense that you're missing something, then quite often you're going to try and fill it up with alcohol, drugs, whatever it is. So, that's why this is an important topic we're talking about today, because we're trying to find ways that people get filled up, that people find a way around that lack in ways that are much more natural, right? And that's what came out of today's panels, is that being closer to nature, for instance, being closer to each other, being in flow, being with the things that are really important to us fundamentally is the way forward and thriving, and hopefully will start to sort of address these addiction problems, these lack problems. Yeah, last one, Helena.
Hi, everyone. Can I add to this? If those of you who know about AA or Al-Anon, for the family or friends of addicts, what they say is we have to find a higher power, and the higher power could be a belief in the divine, but it could be a belief in ourselves. So I think it's a lovely kind of ending theme from your question. It is about spirit and love and maybe the sacred earth and finding all that, and then we'll find meaning. So I think it's a wonderful thing to end today on, that we actually, there is spirit there, however we want to find it, but it is there.
Yeah, spirit, it covers a lot. So thank you so much, Helena. So I'll just give the panelists one last opportunity, just a last reflection, just as a close.
Yeah, just really quickly, because you can't do this in a few seconds, but from a therapeutic point of view, if I had a client that would have addiction issues, I would encourage them to maybe sit in a wilderness space and just try to connect with that part of them that's compensating with whatever that maladaptive behaviour is, if it's the drinking, the consumption, whatever it may be, because there's a part inside that needs to be heard, and it's compensating. This is a simple version with that thing, the consumerism or the alcohol, whatever it may be. And by speaking to your own part and trying to ask it to step aside so you can truly hear yourself and your own spirit. And again, then going back to spirit and saying, Spirit, please guide me. What is it that I need? What does my own soul need in this situation? What do I need to do for myself? I hope that sort of made sense.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah. So just a final couple of words from each panelist, and then we'll close.
I just get the sense that yes, we need to turn towards these things that are causing us stress and make change. But I also get a real sense that we just all need to just do something else as well. You know, like have that space to just do something that's absolutely nothing to do with this environment, Lark. Like my partner's always telling me, like, oh, everything you do is like everything to do with the environment. I'm like, yeah, it is actually. And that is going to wear you down. So like find something that is just completely random, that's got nothing to do with all this stuff. Like, so for me, I've just joined like a musical theatre group because why not? You know, it's nothing to do with like environment stuff. And I think we need that headspace just as much as we need to take action, because how can we keep doing anything if we're not having that time to just be daft and have fun and just play, you know? Having fun, yeah.
Dancing like it's 1999.
Yeah, yeah.
Like we did last night.
So just go out and do something else for a bit. That's great.
Alan, any more last words?
I just got to pick up on that. The dancing last night was awesome, wasn't it? Yeah, really enjoyed last night. Thank you, everyone who was there. It was brilliant. My therapeutic background would teach me about perspectives, and so I trained with David Grove, and obviously that was about clean space, was the sort of main psychotherapy, and that was about having lots of different perspectives, trying to find different perspectives on yourself, on your situation, and that comes free with community and talking and discussing, and then finally, one last reflection is, all that talk of shopping reminded me I haven't given those bags of shopping out. So
Let's do that in a minute.
stick around in the room because after this.
Stay tuned. Stay tuned. Suzannah, quick couple of words on just to close. Anything else you wanted to say?
No, only sorry, but we've still got places left on the ground to fork. So anybody wants to come, get connected, plant some seeds, please do get in touch.
Great. And Jan.
Yeah, just back to the fear and hope. I think we need a little bit of fear to motivate us, but we need something to work towards to give us the hope.
Beautiful, beautiful. So a fantastic session. Thank you all for being here. And that's us.
Thank you to Theresa as well for that. Theresa Sansome actually happens to be my coach and has got me through a lot lately. Thank you for that. Okay, so we shall clear the stage and you can have a short break, and then we resume for one last session, and that is us having a chat about how it's been. Obviously, everything that I do with Creative and Cultural is all about permaculture principles, and one of those is listen and respond to feedback.